And it says here, the Annex Cut is an extract from Sampson's map of America, showing views respecting the New World as constituting the island of Atlantis, alright? The New World? No, it's the Old World because it is Atlantis, alright? It is called Atlantis Insula or Atlantis Island.
We have attempted to piece together the jigsaw puzzle of history that has been scattered by disaster. In so doing, we've found what may be the only remaining traces of the lost kingdom of Atlantis. Of one thing we can be certain: the memory of Atlantis is no myth. It is history. The memory of Atlantis is no myth. It is history.
Atlantis in America. The Navigators of the Ancient World by Ivor Sapp and George Erickson. We've read from this book many times before. It says here, Plato's Atlantis, from myth to reality, all right? Real place. We ain't talking about myths. So-called Atlantis, Atlantean, Atlantis, the Latin Greek. They added the tis. Where was the Atlantis of myth? Well, if you are presently upright in any part of the Americas, you are standing on it, all right? Where's Atlantis? Well, if you're upright in any part of the Americas, you are standing on it, okay? You're standing on it. Plato tells us in the Timaeus and again in the unfinished Critias that Atlantis was it was real, not imaginary island continent. Island continent, big, in that it was located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Straits of Gibraltar, in or across the Atlantic Ocean. And we're back in the book, Researches into the Lost Histories of America, or the Zodiac, shown to be an old terrestrial map in which the Atlantic Isle is delineated, so that light can be thrown upon the obscure histories of the earthworks and ruined cities of America. Again, this is by W.S. Blackett, and this is from 1884. And we continue where we left off. We head over to page 196, where in chapter 18 of this book, it says here, Central America, number 1, the mysterious ruins and hidden histories of Central America, studied by means of the Sagittarius and other signs of zodiacal portraiture of the country, the sign of the Sagittarius and its mythology. And this is a map of Central America, they're saying. So that's the Yucatan. You got Uxmal here in the top, and the rest of the places, Petén, where they're finding all the ruins today with their lighter technology, and all over the place. You know, Belize here, Guatemala, Chiapas, Veracruz up here, and so on. Central America proper is the isthmus, which connects the two insular continents of North and South America. The conformation of the isthmus is very remarkable, and it makes a very noticeable feature in the map of the world. Its position in modern times may make it an impediment to the navigation of large ships in the great oceans, but it must always have been an inlet and outlet to both divisions of the hemisphere. Okay, so what he's saying is just how the way Central America is, right? Like in between these two oceans, very small land. It was like a center, and we've gone over this in my ancient navigational videos. We've shown there was a hub here in Central America of navigation going out to the rest of the world. Even in Costa Rica, they're finding like a whole university kind of with the stone spheres. These large stone spheres seem to have been placed strategically in certain spots, aligning, resembling the stars in different positions and lands and sites in the world. It was marking those ancient places, the sky and the land, with these spear balls, and the navigators will go there to learn. And there was a hub. So like Panama today is you got the canal, and you got ships going in and out to be able to cross through. It was like that before in ancient Central America. This is what he's saying. It was an inlet and outlet to both divisions of the hemisphere. It now becomes necessary to search the literature of the ancients to discover if any light can be thrown upon its early histories. The conquest of New Spain was soon followed up by priests and monks who formed settlements throughout the acquired territory. To a resident clergy, the features of the surrounding countries and their condition could not remain unknown, and in process of time they became aware of the existence of ruined cities and other possessions than those of Mexico and Peru. The first direct attempt to acquire a correct knowledge of the ruined cities of Central America was made by the French, and an artist both well qualified for the purpose and supplied with a sufficient escort was sent into the country. The result of this exploration was given to the world in some volumes of extraordinary beauty and value, but it was reserved to Mr. Stevens, an American gentleman, to favor the reading public with an accessible volume on this subject. Central America includes the provinces of Oaxaca, Tabasco, Chiapas, Guatemala, Yucatan, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. That's the whole of Central America. But the ruins and ancient remains are not discovered in all those provinces. They are spread over a much smaller area of country. They are found clustering around two centers, those of Quiché and Yucatan. That is to say, they are found chiefly in the provinces of Tabasco, Chiapas, Guatemala, and Yucatan. In the work of Brasseur de Bourbourg on the traditionary histories of Central America, it is made manifest that the semi-civilization of Central America on a large scale divided itself into three distinct parts. First, the empire of the Nahuas in Mexico, or Nahuas. Secondly, the empire of the Quiché Maya, Quiché, Quiché, Quiché. And thirdly, the empire of Yucatan. The first having been sufficiently considered, the two last alone are embraced in the present study. The empire of Yucatan. The first having been sufficiently considered, the two last alone are embraced in the present study.
On a mysterious pinpoint in the Pacific Ocean called Easter Island, a gathering of stone giants guards the shore. No one knows who carved them, why they exist, or how the 50-ton monsters were put into place. Yet they're here, unexplainable gargantuan pieces in a baffling mystery. In the jungles of Central America, colossal stone heads were discovered 80 miles from where they were originally carved. Weighing 100 tons, there is no clue as to how they were transported through dense swamp, nor do we know who moved them to this remote jungle. Long before the Egyptians built the pyramids, someone constructed a vast stone city atop a peak in the Andes. Long before the Egyptians built the pyramids, someone constructed a vast stone city atop a peak in the Andes. The ruins stand empty and silent. Each carving is a disconnected figure from the past, yet some common origin might join them together.
And we're back in the book, Researches into the Lost Histories of America. Central America, in the Ptolemaic Zodiac, is depicted by the Sagittarius. This sign is a compound figure and a nondescript. It is a horse and its hinder parts, and a human being in front holding a bow and arrow. A few extracts from poetical astronomers are here necessary. One makes him a son of ocean. He beats the measure when the muses sing and dance. He loved navigation. He is seen not only by those who live in the land, but by those who go to sea. At his right hand rises the ship Argo. Hyginus calls him the son of Pan, and Eupheme, Dupois, In the Coptic Zodiac, there is the same figure, and it is supplemented by a human hand holding an arrow, and called in both cases Aurelis or Regnum Aurelis. The Hindu Zodiac has the same figure, designated Dhanus, the bow. In the classics, it is Chiron or Chiron, the centaur, who is associated with the Sagittarius. The following is the myth of Chiron. Chiron, a centaur, half a man and half a horse, son of Philida and Saturn, who had changed himself into a horse to escape the enquiries of his wife Rhea. Chiron was famous for his knowledge of music, medicine, and shooting. He taught the use of plants and medicinal herbs to mankind, and he instructed in all the politest arts the greatest heroes of his age, such as Achilles, Aesculapius. Remember, we've shown these people are, and we found Aesculapius in America. Hercules, etc. So Hercules, I was just talking about Samson. He was wounded in the knee by a poisoned arrow by Hercules in his pursuit of the centaurs. Hercules flew to his assistance, but as the wound was incurable and the cause of the most excruciating pains, Chiron begged Jupiter to deprive him of immortality. His prayers were heard, and he was placed by the god among the constellations under the name of Sagittarius. All right, there's a little myth there, right? Montfaucon or Faucon says that Xenophon makes Chiron to be the brother of Jupiter. So it could be Chiron. I might be saying it wrong, right? I don't know. Chiron or Chiron, brother of Jupiter. But he was born of Nais, not Rhea. Nais is one of the Oceanides, mother of Chiron or Chiron or Glaucus by Magnus. So remember who the Oceanides, he was saying in previous chapters that it was always in a reference to America or Americans. The Naiades were certain inferior deities who presided over rivers, springs, wells, and fountains. The Naiades generally inhabited the country and resorted to the woods or meadows near the stream over which they presided. They are represented as young and beautiful virgins, often leaning upon an urn from which flows a stream of water. Aegle was the fairest of the Naiades, according to Virgil, etc. The Naiades were mothers of Priapus, god of gardens, Mount Faucon or Falcon. This curious character, Chiron, hardly has the lofty position in history which his tradition assigns to him. His monstrosity hides his dignity. When placed in Central America and its impersonation, he recovers his consequence as the brother of Jupiter. His parentage shows him to be the embodiment of the pre-occupants of North America. Coming into the paradisaical garden land of Central America, all right, paradise, the paradise garden land, listen, of Central America, from the woods and prairies of the red man, it is fair to suppose that he had something to do with the erection of the numerous cities which lie embedded in the luxurious foliage of his plants and flowers. It is not possible to define his exact location. His name is radically the same spelling as Charon or Caron, the boatman of the Styx, who must certainly be put upon the Mexican Gulf. Wherever it was, Chiron must have had much to do with the civilization, education, and refinement of mankind. He was the teacher of the heroes and gods of the past world. His educational establishment was frequented by some of the most distinguished characters. Let them be mentioned. They must all have lived in the now forsaken ruins, at least for a time. Hercules is among the scholars, so that it must be inferred that the inhabitants of the mound cities made settlements in Central America and were put under a course of instruction before they forsook the land in search of new homes. Esculapius was another of the scholars. This brings the Mexicans into the isthmus before the serpent god became the god of Carthage, Epidaurus, and Babylon. Remember Cart, we just read, yesterday, Cart, Hebrew word meaning new city, Cart, and has something to do with Israelites, Carthage, Phoenicia.
There is a place where the knowledge and skills to create the giants may be found. The kingdom of Atlantis. Never before have explorers been so close to finding Atlantis. Never have we possessed as many clues, nor have we been able to bring the detection equipment of modern science to the search. Until now.
Right here, it's called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly. This was from New York, Harper and Brothers, Franklin Square in 1882. Chapter 1, the purpose of the book. It says, this book is an attempt to demonstrate several distinct and novel propositions. These are that once existed in the Atlantic Ocean opposite the mouth of the Mediterranean Sea a large island, which was the remnant of an Atlantic continent, and known to the ancient world as Atlantis. That description of this island given by Plato is not, as has been long supposed, fable, but variable history. Alright, it's not fable. That Atlantis was the region where man first rose from a state of barbarism to civilization. Also, point 4, he says that it became in the course of ages a populous and mighty nation, from whose overflowing the shores of the Gulf of Mexico, the Mississippi River, the Amazon, the Pacific coast of South America, all the way to the Pacific coast of South America. And what's there? Peru, right? The Mediterranean, the west coast of Europe and Africa, the Baltic, the Black Sea, and the Caspian were populated by civilized nations. Point 5, that it was the true antediluvian world, the Garden of Eden, the gardens of the Hesperides, the Elysian fields, the gardens of Alcinous, the Mesophalos, the Olympus, the Asgard of the traditions, and of the ancient nations, representing a universal memory of a great land where early mankind dwelt for ages in peace and happiness. All right, America, right? We're talking about reaching all the way to the Mississippi River, right? That the gods, the goddesses of the ancient Greeks, the Phoenicians, the Hindus, and the Scandinavians were simply the kings, queens, and heroes of Atlantis. All right, hijacked from the indigenous people of America. All these gods, right? They talk about where did they originate? And the acts attributed to them in mythology are confused recollection of real historical events. That the mythology of Egypt and Peru represent the original religion of Atlantis, which was sun worship according to them. Point 8, that the oldest colony formed by the Atlanteans was probably in Egypt, whose civilization was a reproduction of that of the Atlantic island. That the implements of the Bronze Age of Europe were derived from Atlantis. And if you know about the Michigan mines, you'll see that a lot of the Bronze Age metal that the Greeks and Romans used was coming from America, being mined up there. You can research that. All right, and it continues, says the Atlanteans were also the first manufacturers of iron. Point 10, that the Phoenician alphabet, parent of all European alphabets, was derived from an Atlantis alphabet, which was also conveyed from Atlantis to the Mayas of Central America. Like the Atlantis was the original seed of the Aryan or Indo-European family of nations, as well as the Semitic peoples and possibly also the Turanian races. Point 12, that Atlantis perished in the terrible convulsion of nature, in which the whole island sunk into the ocean with nearly all its inhabitants. Nearly, it says. Not all of them, right? That a few persons escaped in ships and on rafts and carried to the nations east and west the tidings of appalling catastrophe which has survived to our own time in the flood and deluge legends of the different nations of the old and new worlds. Plato says that in Atlantis there was a great and wonderful empire, all right, which aggressed wantonly against the whole Europe and Asia, thus terrifying the extent of its dominion. It not only subjugated Africa as far as Egypt, all right, we're talking about Atlantis, tribes from America, all right, and Europe as far as Italy, but it ruled as well over parts of the continent, to wit, the opposite continent of Americas, which surrounded the true ocean. And when he means true ocean, he's talking about when you cross Atlantis, you get to the true ocean, which is the, if you cross America, right, you get to the Pacific Ocean. Those parts of America over which it ruled were, as we will show thereafter, Central America, Peru, and the valley of the Mississippi, occupied by the mound builders. All right. Moreover, he tells us that this vast power was gathered into one, that is to say, from Egypt to Peru, it was one consolidated empire. We will see hereafter that the legends of the Hindus as the Diva Nahusha distinctly refer to this vast empire which covered the whole of the known world.
And we're back in the book Researches into the Lost Histories of America. It is curious to find Achilles in this school, yet it is consistent with the localization of his early mythic life. Achilles, the son of Peleus and Tethys, was the bravest of all the Greeks in the Trojan War. In the Trojan War, Troy, founded by Dardanus, Darda, a son, of the line of Sarah, Judah, of the line of Judah, founded Troy. So-called Greeks, in these Trojan Wars, so-called Greeks were Danites that were invading this other group of, Israelites, descendants, During his infancy, Tethys plunged him in the Styx and made every part of his body invulnerable, except the heel, by which she held him. The very important personage called Aeneas was likewise entrusted to Chiron, the centaur. This will be better studied in the chapter on the Inca of Peru. It is certainly a surprise to find Jason under the training of Chiron in the cities of Central America, but there is much to justify the allocation. It is said that the Sagittarius loved navigation. At his right hand rises the ship Argo. In the cosmogony of Sanconiaton, it is the Cabides who make the first perfect ship and put to sea. On the whole, it must be admitted that the mythology of Chiron, the centaur, as exponent of the obscure histories of Central America and its ruins, invests the land with great distinction and significance in the lost histories of America. He's letting you know Sagittarius has signed meaning with America, symbology.
Now, this book is called The New Atlantis. It says here, begun by the Lord Verulam, Viscount St. Albans, and continued by R.H. Esquire. Actually, this book is very famous because it was written by Francis Bacon, all right? So-called Francis Bacon, all right? Who's Francis Bacon? Is that really Shakespeare? Some say it is, all right? Francis Bacon, and he wrote this in 1660. Bacon is a Sephardic Jewish name. Bacon, Francis Bacon was a Sephardic Jew, a crypto Jew. And I'm going to page 2 right here. And just, again, real quick, we're going to get it, just to correlate, and just zoom in one more time. All right. It says, the next day's conference relates how that though they lived remote and unknown to all other nations, yet they had the knowledge of the languages, books, and affairs of those that lie at farthest distance. How the great Atlantis, which we call America, all right, again, how the great Atlantis, which we actually call America. Atlantis is America. Remember, Atlantis, that's how they added the tis. ATL, that's a Nahuatl word. Atlantis, which we call America, abounded once in tall ships. How the people of Peru, through the South Sea, and those of Mexico through the Atlantic to the Mediterranean Sea, did both in 10 years' space make 2 great expeditions upon Ben Salem, but by the valor of one Altaban king thereof, a wife and great warrior, who cut off their land forces from their ships, and entoiled both their navies and camps with great greater force by sea and land, were repulsed and dismissed by him when they were at his mercy. All right. So again, just want to go ahead and just remind you that when we talk about Atlantis, which we call America, that's basically what we're talking about. We're talking about the true old world. All right.
And we're back in the book, Researches into the Lost Histories of America. Then Pan and Cupid, he says here. Sagittarius is said to be the son of Pan and Eupheme, or Pan. As a father is earlier than a son, it may fairly be expected that the study of Pan will carry back the histories of Central America to an earlier date than Chiron. All right, Pan, Panama, Sepango, Shipango. There can be no manner of doubt that the present tracing of the myth of the Sagittarius is correct because Pan, the father of the centaur, was actually the god of Central America. On the discovery of the province in modern history, in the work of Picard, which treats of the religion of the country, there is a picture entitled The Gods of Tabasco and Campeche. Tabasco is one of the modern provinces of Central America lying upon the shores of the Mexican Gulf. It is described by travelers as a marvel of beauty and such as must have been one of the countries first civilized. The present picture forms a part of the scene. It exhibits in a striking manner the horrible practice of human sacrifice in the Mexican style. The priest, after having opened the breast of the victim, offers the heart to the idol and smears his mouth for blood. In the original picture, on a hill, there is another figure of small dimensions holding a bow and arrows. It does not require an expert to decide that this Tabasco idol is a pan. Huh? A pan. It is so manifest as to require no argumentation. The figure is a Pan in the European form and dress, so that Pan, the father of Sagittarius, must have been the god of Tabasco and Campeche. But not only is the idol a Pan, the priest answers to Cupid. The symbol of Cupid is a bow and arrows. The Sagittarius holds in his hands the emblem of Cupid, and the figure of Cupid is on the hill behind the idol. In a research into the dark history of this land, this circumstance requires notice. In European mythology, there is a curious connection between Pan and Cupid. In mythological monuments, this connection is called the struggle of Cupid and Pan. A picture is here given of that scene, where Cupid stands upon the recumbent person of Pan, and he holds the human heart in his hand exactly in the same way as does the Tabasco priest, just like in Mexico. If he is not smearing the mouth of the god, he holds it very near to it. So complete is the identity of these two scenes that it would be unreasonable to deny that the struggle of Cupid and Pan has its antitype in Tabasco idolatry. There's an origin to that in Mexico, is what he's trying to tell you. It is usual to consider Cupid as a god of valentines and flowers, and it quite spoils the poetry to find him anything else. But this comparison of gods leads to the inevitable conclusion that he is a sacrificial priest instead, all right? That's what Cupid really is. Listen, time and change of place have so completely hidden the real historical antiquities of mankind that even the bloody practice of human sacrifice has got metamorphosed into a valentine. Ha! You guys see what he's telling you? Go ahead and keep celebrating. But there hangs about the traditions and pictures of the ancient world so much of the original truth, as that by research it may be brought to light, that the character now assigned to Cupid is the true one, may be seen from the circumstance that Kamadewa, the Hindu Cupid, has the epithet of Lord of Punishments. He is an executioner. In Greek mythic history, there are two Cupids, Eros and Anteros. Anteros is a savage with a club, but this subject can be carried further and with historical conclusions that throw light upon the ruined cities of Central America. The picture of the struggle of Cupid and Pan has a counterpart in the Hindu collection of historical pictures. And so we got here Garuda and Hanuman. So they're saying it's the same thing. There is no doubt about the identity of Pan and Cupid with Hanuman and Garuda. Garuda is the son of Vinata, just as Cupid is the son of Venus. Hanuman is the son of Pavana. Garuda and Cupid are both men birds, the Harpis of the ancients. Pan is leader of the Pans and Satyrs, and Hanuman is the monkey god of India, answering to the Pans and Satyrs. They play a great role in the story of the Ramayana. The advantage of this comparison lies in the very plain nature and office of Garuda. He is the Vahan of Vishnu. He carries the Oceanides into India. What India? He is a mythic or mystic ship navigating between Central America and Hindustan, okay? Between where? Huh? Where did the Nagas originate? These are real people. Your real Khan serpent people. Amaru feathered serpent. There is a connection here. Very ancient. Guatemala, Guatemala Buddha. His mom is Maya. One of the tablets discovered at Palenque is here given. It consists of a well-dressed man holding an ornamental staff. All right, so let's take a look at it. Native tablet at Palenque. And then you got Garuda and Hanuman on the other side. Okay. Okay, see? So these are like, facsimile. So he kind of tried to draw what he was seeing. All right, you guys see? On each side of him is a native flat-headed Indian. Sitting on his haunches is attire quite original and unimproved. By the side of this group is another specimen of Garuda and Hanuman, still in company, but back to back. Let the reader make a comparison of these pictures and their detailed features, and he will be sure to come to the conclusion that the images of Garuda and Hanuman is a Hindu reproduction of the Palenque tablet. Again, reproduction where? In Hindustan, of an original Palenque tablet. He's just letting you know here who are the ancient Nagas. Let the eye gradually pass down the head, bust, and arms of Garuda, comparing them with the Palenque figure. Then let Hanuman be compared with the two Indians. The monkey features are produced by the boards which form the flat head. Okay? Letting you know, they're just copying, reproduction. Pan and Hanuman answer to the flat-headed Indian, and Cupid and Garuda to the Atlas race, so that these two races must have formed the inhabitants of the land for ages. I'm in the book Ancient Mystic Oriental Masonry, its teachings, rules, laws, and present usages which govern in the order at the present day. True Masonry and the Universal Brotherhood of Man are one, all right? By Dr. R. Swinburne Clymer, author of the Rosicrucians, their teachings, the philosophy of fire, all right? This is deep. The Masons are telling you right here. In America, they recovered what? Egypt and the Promised Land, or the land of the constellation of the Eagle. Isaiah, okay? Now they're telling you, it keeps going, that something happened in America. And secondly, with the consequent wrecking of the continent of America when the globe became involved in the consequences of this order of the skies. This order of the skies, what happened? Did the Dracons come after you? America, known to the mystics as what? As what? Atlantis. I've been trying to tell you, this is Atlantis. It's not me saying it. Ask a Mason with high degrees. They'll tell you, America, known to the mystic as Atlantis, when this ruin befell, was the seat of the greatest empire. America, right? The seat of the greatest empire, and its irresistible armies were terrorizing all of Europe and Asia. All right, remember the Greeks, they were like, no, they're coming to get us. This was the greatest empire in America. The Masons know this. This is their book. Continuing, when following the course of the constellations, those immovably and perpetually fastened upon America reached, it will appear that, while all that is sublime in the historic past centers upon Egypt, all that is sublime in the prehistoric past centers upon America, Atlantis. Okay? Atlantis. And as the current which has hitherto concealed the prehistoric connection between the peoples of ancient Egypt and of America is lifted, it will be seen that the people of the eagle on the Nile, being descended from the original people of the eagle on this continent, they are descended from us over here. It's not the other way around. The twain are one in that prehistoric America was the original Egypt. Again, that prehistoric America was the original Egypt or Eagle Land prior to the mighty dispensation, the days of Peleg, all right, when the lands were separated, when the earth was divided, and the great globe itself was nearly rent asunder. And we're back in the book, Researches into the Lost Histories of America. And it says here, Aureris. In the Coptic zodiac, the Sagittarius is designated Regnum Aureris. If there is one thing more important than another in Egyptology, it is the localization of the Egyptian gods. It is by that means only that it can be made available for the elucidation of history. In this case, the Copts assigned to Aureris the province of Central America. Aroeri, Aroeris, is the elder Horus, brother of Isis, listen, and Osiris. Aroeris was the son of Seb and Netpi, and at Philae he is represented under the form of a hierarch sphinx. In a papyrus he is styled Haroeri, lord of the solar spirits, the beneficent eye of the sun. It is highly confirmatory of the allocation of Aroeris in Central America, okay? An Egyptian deity in Central America, to find him in the form of a sphinx. For in point of fact, the sphinxes are centaurs. They are half animals, half men. The Sagittarius may with propriety be called a sphinx. There is no very distinguishable difference between Aroeris, Horus, and Horhat, Agathodemon. This is mentioned because the travelers who have explored Central American ruins found the peculiar emblem of Horhat, the winged sun. All right, guys, listen. Over the doorway of a ruined house, and we've shown that, just like what they find in Egypt with the winged sun, find it all over Central America, Mexico, and even in South America. Wind sung at Ocosingo and wind sung at Horhat. The same thing. A copy of this fragment is here given, together with the emblem of Horhat. The fragment was found at Ocosinco. Brasuro de Borbog describes the country about Ocosinco as a place of the birth of civilization. I'm going to show you what that looks like in case you guys don't remember. It's massive. There's a pyramid complex there. It's like one solid structure, but it's like many pyramids and levels and floors. I'm going to show you guys. So he says it's the birth of civilization, this place. He says that Tula was the capital, where ruins are found near Ocosinco. It rivals Palenque. There is a curious tradition that there was an underground communication between Tula and Palenque. In Mr. Stevens' work, the travelers reached this place where are ruins of pyramidal erections. There is a door over which is an ornament like the Egyptian winged globe. There are no serpents, all right? He wrote that, just like the Egyptian globe. The legend of Horhat, continuing, makes him to have some connections with Horus. The winged sun belonged to Horhat. The Agathodemon, the device is over doorways. Sometimes he is a hawk, born live on kings. When drawn as a man with a hawk's head, he seems to be the Agotodemon of the Phoenicians. Eusebius makes him to be Neph and a serpent. The temple at Apollonopolis, or Edfu, was dedicated to him, so that he is a form of Apollo. He stands in a boat, and before him are Thoth, Isis, and Nephthys. Horus pierces Apophis with a spear. But what is meant when it is said that the Auruedes was brother to Isis and Osiris and son of Seb and Nepi? Turned into geography and history, it means that the inhabitants of Central America were colonists from China, Tibet, and Siberia. That's his interpretation of that, you guys see? So again, just like many other authors, when they're writing these things and finding these incredible ancient old world culture and architecture, science, civilization here in the Americas, they always try to say it's because they came from somewhere else, And again, seeing it in reverse, he just conjectured that part right there. From this, it must be inferred that the god of, or gods to whom the temples of Apollonopolis and elsewhere in Egypt were dedicated. Again, this is Egypt, so that's what we're trying to say. What you mean? Had been dwellers in the ruined cities of Quiché, Tabascos, and Yucatan. They had been dwellers. They were there before, he's saying. The capital of Tula, Ocosinco, and Palenque must have been the heavenly domicile of the Amenti gods of Egypt. Do you guys hear that? He's saying all these gods he just mentioned, Thoth, Isis, Nephthys, this must have been the heavenly domicile of the Amenti gods of Egypt. All right, it was a real place. We're talking about Central America. We're talking about Thoth said, I'm from Atlantis, man, where there's two volcanoes overseeing from a city in the lake. He literally said that. I've shown you guys that. All right, this is in their mythology. Central America, the domicile of the Amenti gods of Egypt.
Perhaps the most remarkable record of the Exodus from Atlantis is preserved in the 1,500-year-old pottery of a Peruvian tribe called the Mochica. In their vases and utensils, they depicted Orientals and Negroes, Arabs, Indians, Egyptians, and Greeks, people who might have been known to each other in Atlantis. In the stones and bones of the past, we've made a startling discovery. There is a common origin for many widely dispersed ancient civilizations. In the tombs of Peru, we see similarities with other cultures, with the Mayans, with the Egyptians. In the development of mathematics and astronomy, we see links that may reach back to a common origin in Atlantis.
And so, since we just mentioned Thoth in that book, I just wanted to real quick, since we're fresh with the whole Thoth idea. I told you, I've been always telling you that keeps saying that he's from Atlantis and everything. But this book is called Atlantis, Atlantology Basic Problems by N. Ziroff. All right. And just want to read a part of this real quick to correlate what I've been saying. All right. It says here, fascinating study of the god Thoth was published in 1898 by the well-known Russian Egyptologist B.A. Turayev. As sources for his study, he used mainly the writings of the pyramids, inscriptions on pyramids of the 5th and 6th dynasty, the Book of the Dead, a collection of rituals for the dead, fully compiled only in the Size epoch, and the writings of the sarcophaguses of the 6th and 7th dynasty. All these texts are written in the name of a deceased identified with one of the gods. All right, so then it explains a little bit about Thoth, who he was, and he was Hermes and all that. All right, we know that. There is good reason to believe that although Thoth was an ancient deity, he was introduced from some Western land. All right, he came from a Western land. Remember, he said he came from Atlantis himself in the Emerald Tablets. In all ancient hieroglyphic inscriptions, he is linked up with the West. Did you know that? All the hieroglyphics, all the Book of the Dead, and everything about regarding his story always links him with the West, that he was coming from the West. Did you know that? Do you even read any hieroglyphics? Do you know the history? All right, a lot of these Pan-Africans don't even read these things, don't even know or correlate this. All right, it's all over there, which was dedicated to him. The West was dedicated to him. In chapter 161 of the Book of Dead, he plays the same role that the Hellenes ascribed to Atlas All right, we have the Book of the Dead. We're gonna go into this. So he's the same as Atlas. Remember Atlas? Who was Atlas? The son of Poseidon, the first king of Atlantis. That is Thoth, first king of Atlantis, Thoth. All right, in the Book of the Dead, he plays the same role ascribed to Atlas. All right, chapter 161. He supports the vault of the heavens at its four corners. In the inscription of the pharaohs, Userir-an, Thoth is called the ruler of overseas land. He is also called by the puzzle name of providential guide of both lands, east and west. Usually he was portrayed with the head of an ibis and most his body. Statues and also portrayals on sarcophaguses was painted green. All right, so very important because the green ibis, if you didn't know, all right, I'm just gonna let you know where he's from. We're at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, Neotropical Birds, all right, at university website. And this is the green ibis right here. Let me just zoom in. All right, the green ibis, right? Thoth, right? What does it say? The green ibis is a dark colored ibis of wetlands and swampy woods in Central and South America. Not from over there, Egypt, not from Asia. This specific ibis, the green one, is actually from the Americas. The green ibis is resident in lowlands from Honduras, all right, south to northern Argentina. This is the area of the ibis. All right, we have them in Costa Rica. All right, this is where it's found, the green ibis. The green ibis, all right? If we sum up all that we have said about Thoth, we shall get the following somewhat fantastic picture. Listen to this, right? If you do all this research behind Thoth, if you actually do research of his origin and the beginning of Thoth and everything that surrounds him, and even his own words saying, right, he came from Atlantis, right? If we sum this all up, we shall get the following somewhat fantastic picture. Thoth, listen to this, came from a distant land, perhaps that happy western land of Amenti, Amenti is America. Remember, we read that earlier, where the souls of the dead passed on to Aru, Amaru, Aru, the plum serpent. In that land, there was a town by a large lake or sea. There was a town and a sea and a lake, a city and a lake. Oh man! And in its vicinity were two active volcanoes. There was two volcanoes where Thoth is from, and a city and a lake. A city and a lake, and there was two active volcanoes. Then some cosmic event took place in the land of Thoth's birth. Something happened in the land of Thoth. We're talking about the Americas, right? He's from here, Atlantis. Something happened, and the sun was eclipsed for a long span of time. Perhaps this eclipse was due to the eruption of a volcano. In any case, the gods were terrified. Thoth, who was the wisest among them, helped them to flee to the east across a large lake or sea. While they were on their way, the sun returned to its normal state. There is a possibility that this myth is an echo of the catastrophe that overwhelmed Atlantis. All right. So where do we find a city and a lake? A famous city and a lake. You tell me what are we looking at right here? What are we looking at right here, everybody? Yes, this is Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan was a city that was built in a lake. And guess what? You see these two white peaks over here? These mountaintops all the way over here in the back, towards the right. Those are two famous volcanoes, part of the mythology as well, that overlook the Valley of Mexico. All right, remember, it told us that Thoth lived in a city in a lake, surrounded by two volcanoes. Two volcanoes. Look at all these tree stumps over here. Two volcanoes, all right? And these are the two volcanoes. All right, it says Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl. Again, what does it say? That where he's from, in the land of Thoth, there was a town by a large lake, all right, and in its vicinity were two active volcanoes. City and a lake with two active volcanoes. All right, city and a lake.
And we're back in the book, Researches into the Lost Histories of America. There are many things about the ruins of Central America that of themselves create a belief that the early Egyptians must have had something to do with the erection of the buildings. A few extracts from the work of Dupox entitled Antiquities Mexicanas will be sufficient to show that the style of building is Egyptian. You guys, do you know what he's talking about? We just did a video the other day. I just re-uploaded some. I put together. I read more of this article from the exploration of Dupox and some others that went to Palenque and other parts of Mexico, and how they were comparing. This is in 1837. This is a collection I found in the Harvard University Library. What he's talking about here, which Lord Kingsborough also talked about in his Antiquities of Mexicans. That's what he's mentioning. And he's saying, hey, all we got to do is read Dupac's exploration to show that the style of building is Egyptian, so-called Egyptian, right? So-called. You know, what does he mean by that? This is Egypt. This is what we've been trying to tell you. Egypt is a Greek word. In the first expedition, page 4, it is said, at Tepayacan are the ruins of a pyramid 55 square feet and 70 foot high. The artist calls it Egyptian style. At Quanahuac, he found a stone with a Maltese cross sculptured on it. In the second expedition, he comes into the country of the Zapotecs, where are numerous tumuli with underground chambers and figures of men very different from other places. He speaks of them as quite Egyptian. Listen to this, right? He's just calling it Egyptian, right? And he's finding all this stuff in Central American Palenque and in the Zapotecs area. At page 87, he says, no nation but Egypt was so careful of the dead as the Zapoteci. The author was convinced that an underground world could be found by digging. He also says that the Mexicans were not artists. They leaned upon the Zapoteci nation, who were artists. Add to this that a basalt relief found at Chichen in Yucatan is drawn in a style so peculiar to Egypt, with hieroglyphics on the sides, as to put it into the category of Egyptian designs. Guys, you hear that? Just like the hieroglyphics in Egypt. Literally, like if they brought that to a museum over there and put it next to Egyptian hieroglyphics, people wouldn't even be able to tell. All right, you guys hear that? This is the true old world. This is so-called Egypt, to marry the beloved land.
And this is Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly. All right, and this is from 1882. The Egyptians spoke of their hieroglyphic system of writing not as their own invention, but as the language of the gods. Like, oh, that's not ours. That's the gods gave us that. The gods from where? Atlantis, right? From the Westerners, right? From the old world. Lenormand and Cheval, Ancient History of the East, Volume 2, page 208. The gods were doubtless their highly civilized ancestors, the people of Atlantis, like I just said, right? That's their gods. They're people of Atlantis, which is over here in America. All right, you paying attention, right? Who, as we shall hereafter see, became the gods of many of the Mediterranean races. Attempts have been repeatedly made by European scholars to trace the letters of the Phoenician alphabet back to the elaborate hieroglyphics from which all authorities agree they must have been developed. But all such attempts have been failures. They haven't been able to figure it out because they don't want to tell you the truth. But here in the Maya alphabet, we are not only able to extract from the heart of the hieroglyphic the typical sign for the sound, but we're able to go a step farther and by means of the inscriptions upon the monuments of Copan and Palenque, deduce the alphabetical hieroglyphic itself from an older and more ornate figure. We thus not only discover the relationship of the European alphabet to the American, but we trace its descent in the very mode in which reason tells us they must have been developed where? In America. All this proves that the similarities in question did not come from Phoenicians having accidentally visited the shores of America, but that we have before us the origin of the source, the origin, America, the origin, the very matrix in which the Phoenician alphabet was formed, and where? From the shores of America, the origin. That's where the Phoenicians, the so-called Phoenicians, that populated North Africa and Spain and Iberia, right? Some of them became Moors. That's where they came from Canaan, America. They brought their so-called Paleo-Hebrew, this old archaic form of pictograph that was coming from pictorial writings
They were trying to make it phonetic, make it into sounds, make it easier. The Phoenicians, then the Greeks, Latins, and all these other people. In the light of such a discovery, the inscriptions upon the monuments of Central America assume incalculable importance. Why wasn't this taught to us? Well, if we have such discovery, it is monumental. This is a big discovery. All right, this is very important. But this is from 1880s, right? They never told us this. They take us back to a civilization far anterior to the oldest known in Europe. They represent the language of antediluvian times. Antediluvian times, the language of the antediluvians. And we're back in the book, Researches into the Lost Histories of America. The mysterious affinity between the Egyptians and the inhabitants of Central America can be elucidated by pursuing a little further the subject of the gods of Apollonopolis. Now remember, they see all this in reverse. They say, oh, they came here and then they left, right? They didn't even stay, they left. The Greeks saw in Arueris, the elder Apollo. This must be interpreted to mean not their own Pythian Apollo, but some Apollo of earlier time. That earlier Apollo is found by comparative idolatry to be Belus or Bel or Baal. To the elucidation of this subject, nothing is wanted but the Greek myths of Belus and Aegyptus. Belus, a celebrated deity worshipped by the Assyrians, Babylonians, and Egyptians. This was one of the most ancient kings of Babylon, about 1800 years before the age of Semiramis. He was made a god after the death and was supposed to be the son of Osiris of the Egyptians. Aegyptus, a son of Belus and brother of Danaus. So I remember this is all symbolic. Who's Danaus really? Danaus, Dan, and Cadmus coming out of the Exodus in Egypt, right? Look, they're letting you know they're Egyptians, right? Coming out of Egypt. Gave his 50 sons in marriage to the 50 daughters of his brother. Danaus, who had established himself at Argos and was jealous of his brother, obliged all his daughters to murder their husbands the first night of their nuptials. This was executed, and Hypermnestra alone spared her husband Lynceus. Even Aegyptus was killed by his niece Polyxius. And it continues saying Danus the bow. In the Hindu zodiac, the name of the Sagittarius is Danus the bow. It is a centaur shooting an arrow backwards. From this, it must be inferred that Danus was the Hindu name for the inhabitants of Central America, if not the country itself. This Danus corresponds with Danaus, the brother of Aegyptus, so that both the sons of Belus must have been local in the ruined cities in former ages. All right, letting you know, hey, connected to America. Danaus was the son of Belus and Ankino. The myth is not needed as it refers to the movements which must have belonged to the settlements of the Oceanides in Egypt and Greece. It makes capital mythology to be obliged to transfer these two mythic stepfathers from the Mediterranean Sea to the Gulf of Texas. Listen, as it is very ugly, unnatural, and impossible story as it stands. Shifted, it takes the two races of Egyptians and Danaids from Central America, again, from Central America, again, all you Pan-Africans, from Central America to Egypt and Greece, so-called Egypt. They're seen it in reverse. This is Egypt. You understand? They're talking about much, much later. Modern Egypt has nothing to do with ancient. The subject of Bel and Belus as a god in close affinity to Aesculapius has been referred to before. We already found the Central American Aesculapius, right? It makes a very conspicuous part of the mythology of Phoenicia, Babylonia, and Africa. Dr. Movers has a great many Bels: Belitan, Bel Saturn, Bel Comius, Bel Moloch, and others. He seems to treat them as if they belong to Phoenicia. But that theory will not bear examination. Transferred to America, they acquire historical importance. Demonology has 4 bells. Baal, first king of hell, has 3 heads. Balan, great and terrible king of hell, has 40 legions. Belphegor, demon of inventions, and Beelzebub, prince of demons. It is in America, listen, that these 4 bells have any historical and ethnological existence, okay? The origin, even that, is here. And the traditional histories of Mexico and Central America, they are stemfathers of great races of men. Brazour de Bourbourg, in his account of Yucatan, says that the Quiches have a tradition of 4 brothers called Balam, Balam Quitse, Balam Agab, and Balam Mahukuta, and Igi Balam. They are each of the head of tribes to date the epoch most remote of their departure from the land of darkness, Kamuhi Bal, till their definite installation in the mountains of Quiche. They are called Masters of Holocaust. They come from Tulan, Sukwa, Wukup Pek, Wukup Siman, from the east a long way. They came with the families of Tamu and Itokap. They had been forced to quit their country by tyranny.
Author Peter Tompkins filmed the work of an expedition that hoped to locate Atlantis using clues from Casey's writings. Aboard were Count Pino Turola, an Italian archaeologist, underwater explorer Dmitry Rebekov, and archaeologist Dr. David Zink. This expedition was to produce one of the most startling finds ever made in the search for Atlantis. Beyond the giant blocks, the divers discovered the remains of several ships. One had gone down in the year 1830. Beneath it lay the fragments of still another ship, one that had sailed the seas more than 3,000 years ago. Not a ship of Atlantis, certainly, but according to Yale's Dr. J. Manson Valentine, a voyager from Phoenicia. The Phoenicians were the greatest sea traders of ancient times. Their ships called at every port in the known world. Could it be that Phoenician traders came more than 5,000 miles from the site of classical Mediterranean civilization to deal with a rich and fabled kingdom? The question posed by the wrecks and the blocks of the Bimini Wall remained unanswered as the expedition continued to explore the waters off Bimini. South of the wall, Pino Turola, a leading underwater explorer, discovered 4 marble columns. At first, it was thought they were bits of ballast from a wrecked ship. After days of diving and investigation, Turola developed a different theory. He believes that the columns could be 12,000 years old, actual relics of a center constructed in stone and marble. There are more tests to be made. Geologic dating of these and the expedition's other finds could confirm the explorers' theory that here is Atlantis. Here is the fabled world.
So guys, this is what they're talking about. There's literally structures down there where it seems to be aligned, man-made stuff. The Bimini Road. All right? So you guys can get an idea what they're talking about. It's a good one. So it seems to like go off even from the land and it goes into the water. Interesting, huh? The Bimini Road. Just so you guys can get an idea. Oh, here's a good one. So it goes into like, yeah. And then look at this right angle, like how it turns. Some scattered stones. Where could Atlantis really be? It says here. There goes the road.
In the book Prehistoric Structures of Central America, Who Erected Them? A lecture by Martin Ingham Townsend of Troy, New York. The ancient Greek and Roman scholars knew of the existence of the Western continent. It says here, that ancient book entitled The Book of Wonders ascribed to Aristotle, contained the following. When the Carthaginians, who were masters of the Western Ocean, observed that many traders and other men, attracted by the fertility of the soil and the pleasant climate, had fixed their homes, they feared that the knowledge of this land should reach other nations. A great concourse to it of men from the various lands of the earth would follow. That the conditions of life then so happy on that island would not only be unfavorably affected, but the Carthaginian empire itself suffer injury, and the dominion of the sea be wrested from their hands. And so they issued a decree that no one, under penalty of death, should thereafter sail thither. And they're talking about America. This passage is quoted not merely with a claim that it refers to the continent of America, but for the purpose of showing how carefully the Phoenician people, whether Asiatic, Carthaginian, or Spanish, guarded from the great world the foreign discoveries which they had made, and where their kindred were enjoying prosperity, and to enable us to see how little likely their discoveries would be to come to the knowledge of the great mass of mankind.
And we're back in the book, Researches into the Lost Histories of America. All right, so that was chapter 18. We're going to go on to chapter 19 here. We're on page 208. And again, this is the book, Researches into the Lost Histories of America, or the Zodiac, shown to be an all-terrestrial map in which the Atlantic isle is delineated so that light can be thrown upon the obscure histories of the earthworks and ruined cities of America by William Stevens Blackett. Again, we're going on to chapter 19 of this book, and it says Central America, number 2. The description of the central part of the Atlantic isle by Plato and Critias compared with the modern account of Central America. All right. In the 4th chapter of this work, as part of the evidence that America was known to the ancients, the writings of Plato and Timaeus were transcribed. It is there given as Egyptian because the facts were related by an Egyptian priest. That account of the Atlantic island is limited. It relates chiefly to the eruption of warlike nations into the old continent from beyond the Pillars of Hercules. It gives an account of the existence of the Atlantic isle and then describes its submergence in the ocean. Plato returns to the subject in his writings entitled Critias, and he gives a much more extended account of the island, entering a little into its histories and describing at great length the practices of the inhabitants, giving a particular account of the Temple of Poseidon. From the details of the statement, it can be safely judged that Plato is really giving a description of what specially belongs to Central America. On the account, the quotation has been reserved for the present place, and it is now given with the view to throw it into juxtaposition with the modern state of the province and its histories. It is hardly necessary to advert to what some say of the passage, that it is spurious, as the invention of the narrative is less credible than the facts narrated. It is shortened. First of all, let us recollect that it is about 9,000 years since war was proclaimed between those dwelling outside the Pillars of Hercules and all those within them. It's a lot of years, right? The supposed story, right? Of the latter party, then this city was the leader, and of the former, the kings of the Atlantic island. To the gods were once locally allotted the whole earth. To the gods, the whole earth, right? To the gods, you mean Noah's sons? To the gods, the sons of Noah, the lost got split, right? The whole earth, as it says here, the whole earth allotted. Different gods have been received by Lot. Lot, just like Noah split lots for his 3 sons, different regions, proceeded to cultivate them. But Hephaestus and Athena, having a common nature from having the same father, arranged the order of government. Page 420. In the distribution of the earth, Poseidon got, at his lot, the Atlantic island, begot children by a mortal woman, and settled in some such spot of the island, as we are about to describe. Towards the sea, but in the center of the whole island was a plain. On this plain dwelt one of those men named Evenor, with his wife Lucipe, and they had an only daughter Clito. He begat and brought up 5 twin male children, and bestowed allotments on them. To the eldest, who was the king, he gave the name Atlas, from whom the island and sea were named Atlantic. The others were Eumolus, Ampheris, Euamon, Musaus, Autochthon, Ephlasippus, Mestor, Asias, and Diapripis. All these and their descendants dwelt for many ages in the Sea of Islands and extended their empire as far as Egypt and Tyrrhenia. By far the most distinguished was the race of Atlas. The temple of Poseidon himself was a stadium in length, having something of a barbaric appearance. All the outside of the temple they lined with silver, but the pinnacles with gold, and as to the interior, the roof was formed wholly of ivory, variegated with gold and wickelcum, or chum. They also placed in it golden statues, the god himself as standing in a chariot, holding the reins of 6 winged horses, of such size as to touch the roof with his head, and round him were 100 nereids with dolphins. Round the outside of the temple were likewise golden images placed on all men and women that were descended from the 10 kings, and many other large statues, both of kings and private people, both from the city itself and of the foreign countries over which they had dominion. After a description of the land and its practices, it is said of the 10 kings, each individually, in his own district and over his own city, ruled supreme over the people and the laws, constraining and punishing whomsoever he pleased. And the government and the commonwealth in each was regulated by the injunctions of Poseidon, as the law handed them down, and inscriptions were made by the first kings on a column of Wickelchum, which was deposited in the center of the island, in the temple of Poseidon, where they assembled every 5th year. And when they were about to judge, they gave pledges. As there were many bulls grazing in the temple of Poseidon, 10 men went to hunt, and whosoever bull they took, or whatsoever bull they took, they slaughtered. They then filled a goblet with clots of blood, and threw the rest into the fire. And after this, dipping out of the goblet with golden cups, they poured libations down on the fire, and swore to do justice. They then, dressed in beautiful dark blue robes, and sitting on the ground mutually judged each other, assigning the empire to the Atlantic race. Zeus collected all the gods into their own most ancient habitation, situated in the center of the whole world, said. All right, and Mr. Stevens' valuable work, there is an interesting account of the empire of Quiche. So that was, the mythological, some of the stories of what Plato was saying about Atlantis, right, and the Atlanteans. So he continues saying, in Mr. Stevens' valuable work, there is an interesting account of the empire of Quiche. It appears that the mountains of Quiche occupy the center of the provinces in question. Listen, that whole mythology is taking place right here, where you're saying Guatemala, and on one of them was the town of Utatlan, the capital of a great and rich empire, arising out of the Nahuas race. Mr. Stevens says that the kings of Quiche were descended from the Toltec Indians. They came under the guidance of Tunap. They had passed from one continent to the other to a place called the 7 Caverns. From him, right, the 7 caves, they had come from the 7 caves, right, North America. From him descended the kings of Tula and Quiche. Balam Akan was the next king of Quiche. In Brasseur de Bourbough's work, Volume 3, 43, it seems that this Balaam or Bali was sent by the Zapotec king with troops They attacked the mountain, and victory led to the Zapotec grandeur. A temple and a fortress were erected on the mountain. After death, he was held in great veneration. Mr. Stevens describes the palace. It was 876 feet by 728 paces deep. It was a hewn of stones of various colors. There was lodgment for troops and archers. In a saloon stood the throne, under 4 canopies of feathers. In the palace there was a treasury, tribunals for judges, menageries, etc. The chief ruin of the palace was a place of sacrifice, 70 feet square and 33 feet high with steps. This empire of Quiche seems to embrace a large part of the ruined cities now under consideration, among which are Copan and Palenque, the founder of which latter place is said to have been one Wotan, or Wotan, huh? Before him, the characters are mythological. Imos the first, then Ik, or Ik, then Wotan. The quotation from Plato is remarkable, as describing in ancient times the identical palace and temple, or some similar to it, which is described by Mr. Stevens. It's the same exact description that Plato gave. All right? The temple is called by Plato a temple of Poseidon. Listen. And it is especially referred to Atlas and his descendants. Atlas, ATL, that's a Nahuatl word. That's not from Greek, so-called Greeks. It must have been a most magnificent building with 100 net aids. The god stands in a vast chariot with 6 winged horses, so gigantic as to touch the roof. The palace described by Mr. Stevens must have been an immense edifice made of hewn stone of various colors, and a saloon stood the throne under the 4 canopies of feathers. It will naturally recur to the reader that this curious temple or palace must be the same as that which stands for frontispiece of the present work. More properly speaking, the picture of the throne of Neptune must be a representation of the Quiche palace. Listen, that's what Plato was talking about, guys. All this mythology is just talking about the Americas, but with such features of difference as to show that time and forgetfulness has produced a scene somewhat altered. It has been already pointed out that the throne of Neptune is the dragon throne, so that the picture ought to be the throne of Poseidon in the Atlantic Isle. At Quiche, it is found. All right, at Quiche, it's right there. This comparison between the writings of Plato and the modern descriptions of Central America is singularly valuable in forming conclusions concerning the ruined cities, their probable history, and the manner of their abandonment. Let the chief points in the case be considered. Plato puts into the country one Evenor, with his wife Leucippe, and a family. The descendants of these people dwell for ages in the Sea of Islands, a capital description of the Isthmus and the Caribbean Sea. And then they go to Egypt and Tirrenia. They go to the Mississippi Valley, to Little Egypt, the mound building area. They forsake the land and migrate to the old continent. The old continent. Then in the description of the buildings, they are not only great, but decorated with images of kings and private people, both of their own race and of others subdued by them. It is fair to suppose that the numerous basals, relievos, and carvings now found in the forsaken cities are the actual images mentioned. All right? They're there, they found them in America. Then Plato goes on to say that there were 10 kings in the land, each of whom had despotic sway over his subjects. After mentioning customs and laws, many of which are omitted in his transcription for want of space, mention is made of a column deposited in the temple of Poseidon, on which were inscriptions. These inscriptions may be the hieroglyphics which abound in the land, but which have baffled the skill of residents and visitors to the spot till the present day. The document then comes to an abrupt termination. The account says that the people, dressed in beautiful dark blue attire, assigned the empire to the Atlantic race. That is to say, to Atlas, the son of Japetus, the ancestor of the Zapotec sovereign. At last, Zeus collected all the gods into their own most ancient habitation and made his speech to them. What he said or what he intended to say must remain an eternal enigma. All right, so what's Zeus? We're going to see who all these mythological people, little by little, you guys start understanding. They're all talking about people in America or in relation to geography in America. Real people, turn into deities, turn into mythology. The latter part of this interesting document accords exactly with what is said in the traditionary histories of Central America. In those histories, it is said, speaking of the races to whom tradition assigned the dominion, that they were ultimately installed in the mountains of Quiché, the beautiful region in which the ruined cities are discovered. When the statement of Plato that Zeus assembled the gods into their particular spot is compared with the tradition that they were ultimately installed in the mountains of Quiché, the conclusion cannot be avoided that the ruins were the cities of the Titan race, which after a residence for ages, they were either compelled to leave or which they voluntarily forsook. All right, the Titans were real. Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly. All right, now it says the gods of the Phoenicians, also kings of Atlantis. All right, we're just talking about the Americas, man. So why would these Phoenicians have Atlantean gods, right? If they're from the Mediterranean, all the way over there, has nothing to do with them, right? So now it says, not alone were the gods of the Greeks, because they just came from talking about the Greek gods being Atlanteans, right? He broke it down, right, in the previous chapter. So not alone were the gods of the Greeks the deified kings of Atlantis, but we find that the mythology of the Phoenicians was drawn from the same source. They're just getting it from here, all these nations, especially the Greeks. All right, when they're talking about Atlantis and the Western Ethiopians and all that, they're just talking about you over here. All right, when Herodotus is talking about that the ancestors of the Egyptians, they come from a distant Western land where the original people came from. They're just talking about you. Right? This is things you can look up. For instance, we find it in the Phoenician cosmogony that the Titans or giants, Rephaim, we get this in the Bible, Rephaim derived their origin from the Phoenician gods, Agrus and Agrotus. This connects the Phoenicians with that island in the remote west, far away in the west, in the midst of an ocean, where according to the Greeks, the Titans dwell, the giants. Now, we know in the biblical story, Jehoshua, Moses sent Joshua to spy on the land of Canaan, and what did he find? He found giants. According to Sanconiathon, Uranus was the son of Autochthon, and according to Plato, Autochthon was one of the 10 kings of Atlantis. Talking about an Autochthon, original man. He was in where? America, Atlantis. He married his sister G. He is the Uranus of the Greeks, Uranus. He is the Uranus, the same, Uranus, Uranus, same, who was the son of Gaia, the earth, whom he married. The Phoenicians tell us Uranus had, by G, 4 sons. Ilus, which was L, who is called Kronos, all right? And Betilus, Beth-El, and Dagon. The Dagon, haven't I told you this man something to do with corn? Didn't I tell you this meant corn, which signifies bread corn or cornbread? Bread corn. Is corn not a native plant to America? Huh? Who are these mysterious Dogon? Where do they come from? Were these Phoenicians that got kicked out of Canaan? All right, what does their name resemble corn so much? Dagon. Corn. And Atlas, Tammuz. Atlas, Tammuz. Are we talking about Thoth? The famous Thoth, our friend Thoth. Talking about the hijack here, the king of hijacks. Here, again, we have the name of two other kings of Atlantis. These four sons probably represented four races, the offspring of the earth. Probably. The Greek Uranus was the father of Kronos and the ancestor of Atlas. And we're back in the book, Researches into the Lost Histories of America. And we go on to chapter 20. All right, chapter 20. Hope you guys enjoying the reading. It says here, Central America, number 3, Atlas and the Atlantides. The extract now transcribed from Plato's Critias differs in nothing except the details from the writings of Diodorus and Philo. The three together form a very complete history of the Atlantic isle. As to Atlas himself, he is found in all of them, and he is located in the center of the island. To understand Atlas and his identification with the ATLAN race, the reader should peruse the 3rd chapter of this work, where he will see that the history of astronomy proves the identity of the race of Atlas with that of the Atlans, all right? That was chapter 3 we read. Get the drop if you missed that video, guys. We already know Atlas is related to America. There is a curious native picture in the collection of Mexican antiquities, which gives a pictorial description of the movements of the Aztlan race. It is called a place of magpies, where the Mexicans were the first called Aztlanechi. It is much too large for insertion in this place. It shows that the Aztlans were not the aborigines of the country, and is so far justifies the European mythology of Atlas. All right, so they're not the aborigines. That's what I'm saying, guys. Dodge the hijack, seeing it in reverse. It is fair to raise the question whether there is anything in Central America to justify the belief that Atlas and the Atlantides ever had any existence in that country. So because he's trying to say they were only on an island, because he's trying to put Atlantis only in the Atlantic Ocean. So again, remember, this was all connected to here. The myth of Atlas is as follows. Atlas, one of the Titans. We already know the Titans from here. He already proved that. Son of Japetus and Clymene, one of the Oceanides. His mother's name, according to Apollodorus, was Asia. He married Pleione, daughter of Oceanus, or Hesperus, according to others, by whom he had 7 daughters called Atlantides. He was king of Mauritania and master of 1,000 flocks of every kind, and also of beautiful gardens, abounding in every species of fruits, which he had entrusted to the care of a dragon. Perseus, after the conquest of Gorgons, passed by the palace of Atlas and demanded hospitality. The king, who was informed by an oracle of Themis that he should be dethroned by one of the descendants of Jupiter, refused to receive him and even offered him violence. Perseus, who was unequal in strength, showed him Medusa's head, and Atlas was instantly changed into a large mountain. This mountain, which ran across the deserts of Africa, east to west, is so high that the ancients have imagined that the heavens rested on its top and that Atlas supported the world on his shoulders. Gino says that Atlas assisted the giants in the wars against the gods. The only part of this myth which puts Atlas in Africa is that in which he is turned into the mountain, a thing that is impossible. Listen to what he's going to say. All the rest of the myth belongs to the Atlantic isle, okay? It's not in North Africa. All the people, Atlantis is there, Kurimeo. You don't know. You're lying. It's not there, man. His parentage, the beautiful gardens, the dragon, and the wars of the gods and giants are all Atlantic or ancient America. There is an abundance of evidence in the ethnology and topography of modern Central America to prove that it was the domicile of Atlas and his race. All right, it was the domicile of Atlas and his people, was a real person. This was all in ancient America, the true old world, antediluvian. Utatlan, the capital of Quiche, described as the large and rich capital court of the native kings of Quiche, and the most sumptuous found by the Spaniards, carried his name to this day. the castle of Atalaya, which defended Utatlan, the ruins of which are the most striking feature of the place, and which forms a round tower, carries his name in a form still nearer. The plain of Quiche is said to be on the charming river of Atolam. Listen, Atolam, Atalaya, Atlas. The capital of the Zapoteques was Teotzapoatlan, Atlan, Atlas Atlan. Mention is made of the conquest of the mother of the sun in the mountain chain of Teotitlan, Teotitlan, Tehutitlan. Then there is the lake Amatitlan and another called Atitlan, Atilan, Atlantis, right? Just add the TIS at the end of that. Atlantis, Atlantis. In addition to these facts, the Professor Rafinsky, in his enumeration of the Indian races of America, puts at the head of them the tribe of Atalam or Otolam, which he glosses by Kutan and locates in Central America. All right?
You know, when we talk about Atlantis, see the ATL, that's a Nahuatl word. ATL, that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. That's Nahuatl, or that's a American dialect. The tis at the end is the Greek. They added the tis. So Atlan or Aslan, Atlan. We had towns called Atatlan. Atatlan in Panama, Honduras, you know, in different places. Atatlan, Guatemala, Atatlan. And then you add the tis, Atlantis, right? Atlantis. All right, so this is again myths of pre-Columbian America. All right, by Donald A. Mackenzie. All right, so we're on page 86 of this book, and it says here the Abbé Brasseur de Bourbourg, that's a person, who has advocated the view that civilization had origin in America, found it necessary to assume that the American continent at one time extended as a great peninsula from the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea to the Canary Islands or their immediate vicinity. All right, so imagine all the way from Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico, the whole Caribbean, and all the way to the Canary Islands over to the other side almost, near Africa and Europe. All right, the Canary Islands. All right, so that was all connected, he's saying. All right, so when Atlantis sank, did it all sink or just a piece? You know, says this vast extension of land was submerged as a result of a great convulsion of nature. All right, that's what he's saying. Yucatan, Honduras, and Guatemala sank too. But afterwards, the land rose sufficiently high to restore these countries and the West Indian islands. All right. The abbé, who was an accomplished American philologist, professed to have found records of this cataclysm in ancient American writings, of which he gave a hypothetical interpretation. His philological argument in support of the view that his Atlantis had real existence runs as follows. All right, so listen to what he's saying. It says the words Atlas and Atlantic have no satisfactory etymology in any language known to Europe. All right, that doesn't exist over there. They are not Greek and cannot be referred to any known language of the old world or of their languages, right? But in Nahuatl, all right, listen to this, the Nahuatl language, we find immediately the radical A or ATL, like Atlanta, right? Alt or alt, which signifies water. All right, ATL, remember Maya, Ma, the water also, and ATL as well in Nahuatl. The Mexica, Aztec, Uto Aztecan, they speak Nahuatl, right? ATL signifies water, war, and top of the head, top of the head. From this comes a series of words such as Atlan, on the border of, all right? Atlan, like Teoti, or like Tinochtitlan, all right? Amid water, all right? So the city of Enoch, amid the water, Tinochtitlan. What Enoch? All right, so Atlan on the border of or amid the water, from which we have the adjective Atlantic. All right, that's from here, not a Greek word. We have also Atlaka,
to combat or be in agony. It means likewise to hurl or dart from water. And in the preterist makes Atlas, Atlas, a city named Atlan, all right, to hurl or dart from water, and makes Atlas, a city named Atlan, existed when the continent was discovered by Columbus, all right? There was a city, and we've read this before, all right? There was an actual city called Atlan, I believe in Panama somewhere, existed when the continent was discovered by Columbus at the entrance of the Gulf of Uraba in Darien, yup, that's in Panama, with a good harbor. It is now reduced to an unimportant pueblo named Akla. You see, they switched the name, but it was called Atlan. So you know how Greeks add the TIS to the end. So that would be Atlantis, according to a Greek, right? Atlan, this town, this city would be known as that. So that's an ancient town, a navigational port. We know Panama's the Panama Canal, that's where all the ships go, right? Well, it was like that in ancient times. He continues, says, those who have pinned their faith to Plato's account of the lost Atlantis have overlooked two facts. Says here, one, that the events related to Solon by the Egyptian priests took place 9,000 Egyptian years earlier, and that navigation on it, the Atlantic Ocean, ceased on account of the quantity of mud which the engulfed island left in its place. All right. Now he's talking about when Plato's and all these Greeks are recounting the tale of Atlantis, they tell you that during those days the Atlantic was navigable, meaning they couldn't navigate the Atlantic during Plato's time. Those ancient Greeks couldn't navigate the Atlantic. There was too much mud, he wrote. That's what Plato wrote, all right? And we're back in the book, Researches into the Lost Histories of America. Among the interesting tablets which were discovered on the ruined buildings of Palenque, there is one which may have been the likeness of Atlas himself. It is here given, if not for an argument, at least for curiosity. All right? In the tablet itself, there is a man kneeling before the present figure. He appears as if in deep admiration of the man. It will be observed that the figure carries behind him an object which looks very much like some astronomical instrument, such as the ATLAN astronomers must necessarily have used. On his head he carries the head and tusk of an elephant. In the description of the palace of Quiché, mention is made of ivory in large quantities. Ivory shows intercourse with Africa, and the myth of Atlas makes it manifest that Atlas and his race must early have crossed the Atlantic into Mauritania, okay? Into Africa, not reverse, all right? With your whole out of Africa theories debunked. Into, all right? But the only thing is here, they leave it out, is that we had so many elephants here, guys. There was ivory here. There was so many elephants. That must be what is meant by his being turned into the mountain. He must have went over there. That being so, the present figure may have been the portraiture of Atlas or some of his astronomical disciples. The Atlantides were the daughters of Atlas. They were 7 in number. Maya, right? Maya, isn't that the mother of Buddha? Electra, oh, Electra from Marvel, huh? Electra, Maya, Electra, Peget, Asteropi, Meropi, Eropi, right? Europi, Eropi, Alcyone, and Celeon. They married some of the gods and most illustrious heroes, and their children were founders of many nations and cities. They were called nymphs, etc. On the common interpretation of mythic traditions, these Atlantides ought to be provinces or places in Central America. They ought, in fact, to be the inhabitants of the numerous and extensive ruined cities which are scattered over the province. There is, however, a passage in the mythological lexicon which throws doubt on that allocation by representing the Atlantides as a people of Africa near Mount Atlas. That is where the mistake lies, all right? That's a mistake. That's your own hijacking biases. And it is that which creates such confusion in history, all right? Stop trying to confuse with your outdated theories. Theories. The learned both in ancient and comparatively modern times seem to have found it difficult to believe in the existence of a great land beyond the Atlantic Ocean, only because they don't want to believe. You see, it's all biased, like I just said. They don't want to believe. It is only when that mistake is corrected, only when you get out your own biases and empty your cup, right, that history becomes consistent. All right, just follow the truth. There is a speech in Nonus Dionysica, which shows where the Atlantides ought to be placed before their arrival in Africa. All right, before they went that way, right? Thoth, didn't Thoth say he was an Atlantean? Electra in a conversation with Cadmus. Remember who Cadmus is, and that's his, I believe, his sister, right? Cadmus is coming out of the Exodus, Egypt, possible Israelite. Diodorus said that, wrote that. I am queen. So Cadmus says, I am queen. So she says, sorry, to Cadmus, I am queen and have been one of the Pleiades. I have lived so far from my eternal home, who shall never again see one of my 7 sisters, Sterope, Maya, and Seloonu, who shall never press my bosom, Lacedaemon, son of my sister Teget, to whom is refused to enter the house of Aleione, or to have sweet conversation with Merope. Ah, what I regret most, Dardanus, my son, leaving his country to pass to the plains of Ida, Darda is a son of the line of Judah, guys. Of his side, my father Atlas, in his old age, and in the enclosure of the 7 zones, still bends his shoulders at the bottom of Libya. I hope to exchange the sojourn of the earth for the sojourn of the Atlantic sphere, and to shine among the stars. In this beautiful and touching speech, Electra shows in the most convincing manner where was her celestial domicile, and that of her sisters. It was in the Atlantic sphere, not in Africa. Again, it was in the Atlantic sphere, not in Africa. The term 7 zones is an expression, if judged by the Ophite Gnostic map at page 80, that must be synonymous with the 7 provinces of Central America. If judged of in the light of the Hindu diagram of Patala at page 167, it must be considered as one of the 7 divisions of North America. All right, one of the 7 divisions of North America, India Superior, the only Atlantid or Atlantide or Atlantide, sorry, that can be discovered as ethnological in Central America is Maya. But that is very important in this research, as the Mayas form, at this day, a very large part of the population, both of the peninsula of Yucatan and the islands of the Caribbean Sea. The province of Yucatan is full of ruined cities, and it is expected by modern travelers that any diligent search and the use of the pickaxe may lead to discoveries of the highest possible interest. The account of the Empire of Yucatan is in the work of Brasseur de Bourbourg. The author shows that the traditionary histories of the country make 4 brothers to enter Yucatan. All right? They are called Tutul Chius. They have a priestess of fire. They conquer Chichen Itza and form an alliance with the kings of Mayapan. Kukulkan is at the head of this state. All right? Remember what Kukulkan means? The law-given priest, law-given high priest. It is a state of great wealth and has fine roads, etc. It is then said that these 4 Tutul Chius are the same as the 4 Balams or the empire of Quiche and the 4 Mexican personages of Nahuatl. It's all the same story. They had a temple to the son of Izamal. They had a god of music and poetry. Kukulkan is described as the sage governor of Yucatan. He introduced confession and interdicted human sacrifices. This is the kingdom of Mayas. This extract is suggestive. It shows that the ruined cities of Yucatan must have been a great and civilized kingdom. Its religion is described. It was that known in history as the sun worship with the fire rites. Dodge the hijack. It was religious, it had confessions, and it was free from the crying evil of human sacrifices. Listen, a custom prevalent in the adjoining province of Tabasco and Campeche at the time of modern discovery. These religious peculiarities are in accordance with the buildings themselves. They had monasteries and nunneries, and no temples nor idols seem yet to have been found. As to the race itself, what it said is conclusive. It was the same as the Zapotec race of Quiche and the Nahuas of Mexico, the civilizers of those lands. In that case, the kingdom of Mayas must have been a branch of the great Titan race and one of the Atlantides. Oh, it must have been, huh? I told you this is Atlantis, it's the same people, same connection. It is confirmatory of this teaching that the pictorial map makers have delineated the region as the Corona Australis, both in the Atlantis of Diodorus and the cosmogony of Phoenicia. The race is made to spread abroad over the length and breadth of the Atlantic isle. Time and migration must have shifted the location of the people, but they still have the crown as their heraldry. So again, he's trying to say, oh, they come out of an island in the Atlantic. No, they were always, remember, the oldest land is near Canada, the oldest land coming out of the waters, right? And then the border, Canada, New England, New York, up there in the Great Lakes region, very old, ancient place up there. Oldest forest, oldest fossils, oldest water, all that was shown, okay? It would seem from all that can be gathered from native sources and European traditions that the mountains of Quiche must have been the spot where were assembled in the latter ages of the preoccupation of America the remnants of the descendants of the colonists from all parts of the hemisphere. Wars and dissensions appear to have driven them together. There must have been many from Mexico, as the presence of the Zapotecs shows. There must have been people from the Mississippi, listen, as the presence of flat-headed Indians proves. The Appalachian Indians, their medicine men and gods, must have been there because the Carib Indians, whom Mr. Stevens found at Palenque, are said to have been Appalachian Indians from Florida. Listen, look at all the people that were in Mexico, right? I told you this is a metropolis, right? Many different peoples there. And later studies will show that there must have been many from the western shores of South America, all right, Peru. It is then said that it was Zeus who assembled them in the center of the island. Some say we're going to get another book, if you guys remember. Zeus is just a hijack uh, uh, epithet created mythology and so-called Greeks of Judah, the line of Judah. They might be talking about Judah. We're going to read about that in another video, guys, soon. I don't want to confuse you. But you know how they change everything and turn it negative and then make it into mythology. So again, it is then said that it was Zeus who assembled them in the center of the island. This mingling of races is seen in the mythology of Electra. Apollodorus makes Electra to be a daughter of Atlas by Pleione. She was changed into a constellation. Ovid makes her to be one of the Oceanides, wife of Atlas, and mother of Dardanus by Jupiter. If this has any real significance, it exhibits a mixture of races among the Atlantic kingdoms. Just talking about different people getting together. The sudden appearance of Dardanus in this short myth introduces one of the most important and interesting chapters in this story, or call it drama, for the announcement is at hand. When the antiquities of Europe and Asia come to be studied in the light of the Zodiac, it will be found that the traditionary histories of Europe, listen, are almost as dark, as disarranged as those of America itself. The mythic life of Dardanus needs readjustment. Remember Dardanus, that's Darda, the founder of Troy, or the progenitor of the Trojans, right? He is son of Judah, I believe the son of Mahol, right? Through Ethan, through Sarah, Simri, one of these, that's, I believe, the lines, and Judah, a descendant of Judah, literally, of Judah himself, Darda. So they're saying the mythic life of Dardanus needs readjustment. As has just been seen, he is an Atlantid, son of Electra. Yeah, he's from America. Queen, as she says in one of the Pleiades. In the myth of Boreas, it is said that Boreas changed himself into a horse to unite himself with the Mares of Dardanus, by which he had 12 mares, so swift that they ran, or rather flew, over the sea without hardly wetting their feet. Who was Boreas, and where did he reside? He is commonly put on the Thracian mountains. Thracia was the residence of Boreas. When that mistake is corrected, it will be found that the isle of the Hyperboreans is Britain, a very suitable place for his mares. Dardanus and Boreas marry and have 12 flying mares. That can mean nothing else than that the inhabitants of Palenque and Yucatan had ships in conjunction with the inhabitants of Britain. And that creates a regular navigation between the two hemispheres. Listen, this is deep, guys, what we're just reading about, right? Where was Jeremiah and all these people coming from, right? So-called Egypt. I told you the real ancient Egypt, America. Look at what he's telling you. An ancient connection here between Central America, or the Yucatan and Mexico, and Britain. Regular navigation between both hemispheres. This is one of the innumerable instances in which the tracing of myths introduces a personage just at the moment he is wanted. All of a sudden, they got Darda. This is what I'm saying, guys. Their myth don't make sense. It's a real person that was Darda, a descendant of Judah. The history of the northern part of the Atlantic isle has been traced with great care, and it is now brought to the eventful moment when the gods and kings are about to forsake their country and to marshal their troops for that great warlike invasion in which they conquered all Libya and Western Europe. Or in other words, that great dispersion is about to take place by which the inhabitants of the oceanic hemisphere mingle their blood and fortune with the people of the old continent. He keeps saying they're still trying to say that's the old world over there. And we're talking about that Atlantis is way older than all those cultures. So what do you mean? It make it make sense, man. At this moment, two characters appear whom mythic history represents as the navigators of the Atlantic Ocean. But not only do they appear at the right moment, they show themselves at the proper place. Quiché, Palenque, and Yucatan formed a convenient spot for this great maritime adventure. But before the flight of the gods is introduced, it is necessary to protract the story a little, to examine the tablets and sculpture which have been discovered in the ruins and entangled foliage of the great woods of the land. So, I guess right in the beginning of this book, it has this image right here. You guys recognize this place, right? So pretty interesting. So this is a famous map of the Antilles, or Antilles, or Antilia. And this is how they usually draw it, something like this. So what the author, I guess, is saying is that Atlantis, or Antilia, is just like the eastern part of North America, or USA. So you got the Susquehanna River on the top. You got the Ohio River right here, the Mississippi right over here, and the Atlantic Ocean, Florida sticking out, Mississippi, so Louisiana, Mississippi. This is the book we're going to be reading, Atlantis, Dwelling Place of the Gods by Henriette Mertz, 1976, when he wrote this. Antilia, Chapter 3. Medieval maps, and particularly nautical charts, are a fascination, picturing as they do odd bits of fact and whimsy known best to mariners. On most of these medieval charts, islands in the Atlantic, of which historians find no documentary record, have been brushed aside as being purely mythological or non-existent. Three of these so-called mythological islands persistently appear on early nautical charts of the Atlantic: St. Brendan, or Brandini, Versilo, Brasilia, or Brazil, right? High Brazil, and Antilia, or Antilia. Perhaps the most intriguing of all ancient or medieval maps is the recently found Piri-Reis map showing islands in the Atlantic, but more importantly, mapping a portion of the southeastern coast of North America and the entire east coast of South America, and including the Palmer Peninsula of Antarctica. Piri-Reis tells us that he compiled this map from some 20 or more earlier maps and charts dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, about 350 BC. His marginal notes and voluminous pertinent facts scattered amongst those notes relate to Antilia and to Columbus that indicate common knowledge throughout the Mediterranean. Piri-Reis places the island of Antilia on the far side of the Atlantic, where he says the sun sets, right? The sun sets in the west, in the western region. He has drawn beautiful parrots and macaws, perching on rum lines, and telling us these birds come in colors of white, red, green, and black. But more importantly, he assures us that Columbus had in his possession a book containing maps showing the western Atlantic, its coasts and islands. All right, Columbus, what? He had a book in his possession showing maps of the western Atlantic. He already knew all of this. He didn't discover anything. It was all planned, guys. His real name was Salvador Fernandez Sarco. The earliest suggestion of Antilia is on a chart believed to be that of Pisigano of 1367, all right? The earliest known chart showing the island and identifying it with the name Antilia is the nautical chart of 1424, the original of which is in the possession of the University of Minnesota, all right? They have the chart. Go take a look at it if you're in Minnesota, and which also may be attributed to the Pisigano family. Andrea Bianco has, to his credit, a world atlas of 1436 comprising some 7 regional charts, as well as the famous one of 1448, which in later days stirred considerable controversy. The fourth map in Bianco's World Atlas charts the North Atlantic and includes the coast of Spain, Portugal, North Africa, as well as islands in the Western Atlantic, including Antilia. This says plate 4 map of Andrea Bianco, 1436. So here goes the Antilles right here. Let me just zoom in, guys. All right. You guys see it? Let me back up a little bit. All right. So you see that Florida sticking out, going into Louisiana, right? The Mississippi, the East Coast. You guys see that? That's the Antilles. It's the southeast and the East Coast going all the way up to the border, the Susquehanna River. All right? Once you see this, now we can't unsee this anymore. Yeah, we cannot unsee this anymore. All right? When we first examined Bianco's map, we were amazed at the striking similarity of the southern shore of Antilia with the Gulf Coast of the United States, from Florida to New Orleans. Possibility immediately existed that such might be the fact from Florida to New Orleans. When considered with the distance west of the Azores, the magnitude of the landmass, the latitude north and south, that this southern shore appeared to have been drawn with great sensitivity and eyewitness observation. We should like to set forth in detail the mile-by-mile study of this southern coast of Bianco's map, which was undertaken arbitrarily starting on what would be the southern coast of Antilia, corresponding to the region where Jacksonville, Florida now stands. As a matter of convenience, proceeding south from this point, hump noted by Bianco may well be the hump at Cape Canaveral, which lies south in an analogous position from Jacksonville on the Florida East Coast, continuing south to Miami and the tip of Florida, then rounding the peninsula, turning northward. This peninsula would form one of the 2 large projections that first led us to an identification. Continuing north, Bianco shows a large bay, which from its distance north from the point and the nature of its contour strikingly resembles Tampa Bay. All right, Tampa Bay is on that. This is maps from 1300s and 1400s before they were supposedly coming to the Americas, right? This is the mythical Antilles, which was part of Atlantis. Literally, Antilles, Atlantis, it was part of the mythology of Atlantis. But it's literally the southeast, the eastern coast of USA, literally. All right. To the north end of this projection on the west, Bianco notes another bay having within it two smaller bays. This correlates with the double Appalachia Bay due south of Tallahassee. The Appalachia Bay, where both Narvaez and De Soto camped. While Bianco mapped this double bay somewhat oversized, he probably derived his information from sketches made by an observer who, in keeping his notes, paid no attention to scale, and Bianco, as draftman, would therefore have been handicapped in determining any relative scale and assembling the parts from the observer's notebook sketches. Traveling westward along the coast, a small cape is shown, smaller than actual, its underside, again, due to the lack of, and this is the next page, again, this is what they were talking about, map of Antillia as drawn by Bianco, all right? Mississippi, the Atlantic coast, the Gulf of Mexico down here, Florida. All right, showing you some comparisons, and the bays and everything matches, like literally, guys. So here's a Canaveral, Miami, Tampa Bay, Appalachia Bay, Mobile Bay, Brenton, sorry, New Orleans, Mississippi River. So lacking comparative scale beyond this cape, a significant detail in mapping occurred, a detail of omission rather than of commission, for the map shows a bay with its upper end open and unconnected. This bay lies in a position analogous to that of Mobile Bay. At its northern end, Mobile Bay has two wide river mouths emptying into it with an irregular series of finger-like channels occupying the entire space between the two rivers. That the shoreline on the map had been intentionally left open is a matter not to be lightly brushed aside, for in 1436 the northern limits of the bay had not been determined by the first observer. Therefore, that line was left unconnected, a rare detail in map making that removes it from the realm of coincidence and bespeaks an eyewitness observation. Leaving Mobile Bay heading west, another large bay is shown before turning south to the tip of the second projection on the southwest. This bay appears to be Lake Borgne, coupled with Lake Pontchartrain, with the projection itself corresponding to the long spit of land fanning out south of New Orleans, forming the delta of the Mississippi River. Right, it all matches. These two projections characteristic of Antillia on all maps would thus be the Florida Peninsula and the delta of the Mississippi. Within these two projections, all features as they exist today can be found. This is the land traversed by Cabeza de Vaca and De Soto, same one. They had the map. Remember, they went to Antillia, seeking in this very region the seven cities of Antillia, in this very place, right? Where did De Soto and Cabeza de Vaca go? This is where they came. Both knew Appalachia Bay, and this medieval map would have been available to them. While it was this southern shoreline on Bianco's map of Antillia that instantly attracted our attention, the remainder of the boundary of the island must be understood to be the boundary of the island, to be the conjecture for definite eyewitness detail is lacking, and this portion appears to have been a copy of an older map. However, in spite of lack of detail, enough remains so that the area can be determined, and we shall follow around the boundary from the southwestern tip of the projection formed by the Mississippi Delta. The counter line turns sharply north, which, if we left the Gulf Coast at New Orleans, the turn north would proceed inland by way of the Mississippi River system. If such a watercourse by river could be followed, eventually coming out into the Atlantic, this then might well be the fabled island known in medieval times as Antillia, as known to Plato as Atlantis. All right. The western boundary of Antillia on Bianco's map runs straight north with little variation, paralleling the course of the Mississippi to present-day Cairo. All right, to present-day Cairo, huh? Just like, look at the coincidence. This is what we're telling you guys. Where's the real one? Where's the copy? Just like in Cairo, huh? A short distance from the bend at Cairo, the Ohio joins the Mississippi. And if an exploring party followed up the Ohio rather than due north up the main river, a watercourse would bring them to Pittsburgh, where the Monongahela and Allegheny join to form the Ohio. At this point, the map turns abruptly east. Due east of Pittsburgh, the Kurimeo, a tributary of the Allegheny, today connects with the West Branch or the Juanita, tributaries of the Susquehanna, over a short portage of some 2 miles immediately southwest of Altoona, locally known as Horseshoe Bend. And from there, the watercourse continues down the tributary to Harrisburg, where it joins the Susquehanna, and on out into the Atlantic Ocean at Chesapeake Bay, southward from Chesapeake Bay. Now, in the Atlantic, the line bounding the island of Antillia connects with our starting point on the Florida Peninsula at Jacksonville, thus circumnavigating for some 3,000 miles the long, narrow island, which distance around Plato gave as approximate 3,000 miles over than the short portage at Horseshoe Bend. This entire waterway is navigable today by small craft, a true island as it was known anciently, unrecognized as such today. All right, guys. So this just literally made me picture what we've been learning about this region of the world, how it came out of the waters first. Remember, this was an island. The Appalachian going up to all the way to New York up there, it was an island. Remember, this was ancient. That means there was people drawing maps back then. So now we don't have to add the whole millions of years like everybody does, but we're just telling you that this was an island at one point. There was ocean going through the the plains. This had separated this part and going up to Quebec a little bit, and that river, the Great Lakes, it made this an island. I just thought of that. I'm like, wow, wow, interesting. All right, so real quick, on the previous page, they had the map again. All right, so he's Susquehanna River, the Ohio River coming in here, the Atlantic Ocean, the Mississippi, the Gulf of Mexico, Florida. Again, map of Antillia located geographically. Located. They located it.